and welcome. My name is Errity Green and this is Psychic True Crime. And today I am bringing you a reading on Britney Spears behind the scenes. So we already covered Britney Spears a little bit. You can check out those past videos. Today I wanted to dive into the behind the scenes of not only her conservatorship, but the breakdown of her marriage with Kevin Federline, which led to her overall psychological breakdown, as well as her overall journey in the timeline of events. And what else do I have here? Overall, just a look at what has led to where we are today, where Britney Spears is today, to this Free Britney movement. Now, if you've watched my past videos on Britney, you know that I've been a fan since Baby One More Time, and that I was an avid follower of her for many years, shared on social media about her. And then over the years, I matured, and yet I am still an ultimate fangirl, although I don't dive in as often as I could, but I do through these readings. So that's what I'm going to be bringing you today, is the behind the scenes look at Britney Spears, Kevin Federline, her mental health breakdown, the conservatorship, and where she finds herself now, and potential outcomes. So if you like this kind of thing, I encourage you to stick around, do like, subscribe, press the bell icon. That way you receive notifications every single time one of these readings pops up. And then if you want to get to know more about me, my day job, what I actually do for a living, you can check out those details and links below. And without further ado, I think we will get started. So I pulled cards for a few different things. So it looks like so far we have a behind the scenes look at her conservatorship and maybe some of like the deeper undercurrents and themes of what it was meant to bring her at a spiritual level. And if you are a follower of me, you probably know that I dive into the more spiritual aspects, psychological aspects. You can check out my other channel, Wise Women Oracle and Tarot. That is linked below, as is Wise Women Television, the two other YouTube channels that I have and share on. So it looks like we're going to dive a little bit into the spiritual aspects. Then we talk about her and Kevin Federline, the breakdown of the relationship, what happened, Kevin's contribution to the breakdown of the relationship, her contribution, as well as sort of the events that led to the destruction of that relationship, but also that 2008 breakdown in general, like what events, what was happening behind the scenes, what was really going on. If you haven't read the New York Times piece by Ronan Farrow, that's an opportunity to dive deeper into the factual elements that we are aware of as the public, but I feel like there's so much more massive undercurrent of things that are happening behind the scenes that we just have no idea about. And we might eventually find out through a memoir or something like that of Britney's. But for now, we have psychic readings. And then we're going to talk about, what was this one? Give me a moment. Britney's mental health, her psychology, what brought on the necessity for this conservatorship, at least behind the scenes, the things that we don't know, and then potential outcomes. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the first cards that wanted to come out weren't exactly what I had expected. I have to follow the flow of the energy, even though I might have an idea of what I want to share on, what I want to talk about. It doesn't always go my way. And it was immediately talking about the conservatorship and saying that at a spiritual level, you know, this became an opportunity for reclusiveness, solitude. It ended up coming with a whole set of other baggage, stuff that ultimately wasn't good for her and things that she's fighting now and rebelling against. But there was some purpose to this conservatorship at a deep level. And it's almost like this might have been a manifestation of a deeper subconscious desire to rest, to live an ordinary life, to just be with her kids and her family and not have the hustle and bustle of a public persona and life. A famous life typically requires, or at least tends to have, a lot of travel, a lot of people, a lot of events, a lot of this and that. And it's almost like part of this could have also been a subconscious manifestation where she just wanted to be at home and with her family and be at peace. But unfortunately, the way that it had come to occur, as we know, through the conservatorship, is through domination and control of her father. Now, again, I have talked about the conservatorship. I have talked about Britney and her father in our previous videos. If you want to know more about that at a deeper level, go ahead and check that out. But we're looking at the conservatorship now, and we're seeing that this led to a lot of darkness in her life. So ultimately, while yes, it did meet this need for rest, Brittney also, this is all allegedly, and I don't think any of this will be slander because all of it, I mean, or any kind of potential legal ramifications, anything that would require that, because I only speak and believe highly in Brittney. And I think she's human, and we all deal with these issues, which is why I have a whole other channel, Wise Women, Oracle, and Tarot, that talks about our own issues. So I just want to make that clear. With that said, it looks like she went through, this became something that was very difficult for her. So even though this confinement could have served, and probably did in its own way, as an opportunity to rest, to replenish, to refuel, to stay at home, to be home, to connect with the people close to her, to not have to be out on the scene or in the public eye or in the fishbowl, not around the paparazzi. It's almost like she was so desperate to get away from all of that. But then the way that this dish was served was through a means that did not turn out in the way that she wanted. And of course, no one would want this kind of abuse or confinement or imprisonment. It's like it served one need, her need for rest, her need for solitude, her need for home and family. But she has other desires and needs within her, say for play and creative expression and freedom and independence and sovereignty, and to live by her own truth, and for companionship and friendship. And so it's like all those other needs were being neglected, but it was serving this need of solitude, of reflection. But it looks like she's coming out of this time where she felt confined by this conservatorship. I feel like she's on the heels of freedom. She knows it's coming. I feel like this could also reflect what's coming up here is her rise to fame as well. Whereas I feel like a lot of her experience in terms of her ambition and seeking for not really fame, to make it big and to be on the world stage and to perform on stages and to make her albums and all that stuff. A lot of that too, I feel like, was an escape from her family home. I don't think she knew that. And most of us as children wouldn't know that or recognize that. You know, we think it's just a hobby or a passion or our art, and it very much is and was for her. And these are things that are necessary for her to explore, to express, which is why she feels so tied down and confined, because she's not able to fully express herself. And that's a huge part of her soul's journey, is self-expression on all levels. And so when those things are muted for her, it's almost like you are caging a wild horse. You're caging or trying to domesticate a wild animal. Brittney will not be tamed. And I actually love that about her energy. And as I'm hearing that, I'm like, oh gosh, that brings peace to my heart. Like, I feel like it just resonates so much with all the things that I've loved about her over the years. It's almost like she was always meant to be a wild horse. It's almost like she was always meant to run free, to be her full self and operate in her full expression. Like, that's ultimately what her soul wants. But it was very difficult to face the barrage of like hate and misunderstanding and skepticism and scrutiny that was thrown at her as a result of her just being herself. So it's almost like she has this one part of her that's like in your face, I'm going to do me, F you, F that, F this, you know? Then she has this other side that's a very sad, scared, wounded, tender animal, because it's almost like when she does become her full expression, you know, there is rejection, there's persecution, there's punishment, and there's hell to pay. So I don't yet think she has fully reconciled, and who could, but I think she'll get there. It's kind of like the deeper spiritual undercurrent of all of this is reconciling that inner self-expression with the part of her that feels like it's going to be hurt or harmed by being her full self. There might be an opportunity for healing there, for reconciliation within herself, for liberation, for integration. But there's something there in terms of bringing those parts of herself together, as well as it doesn't feel like an energy of just like not caring about what other people think and like forgetting about the consequences, but it feels like being herself, and even with the consequences, it's almost like still letting herself be okay. Like, it's not this big empowering energy, like F the haters and like that kind of energy. Like, never mind, I'll just rebel against them. It just feels like, wow, they really do hate me, or, you know, they have a lot of really negative things to say, and still loving herself anyway. That's more of like what the energy feels like. All of that to say, that wild horse self-expression kind of energy is always there, a huge passion, part of her truth. And yeah, I feel like also her fame and her path to fame was a an escape route from a challenging childhood or a challenging family that probably always would have felt like some kind of refinement or imprisonment. And that could be due to her father, due to the family secrets, due to the alcoholism, due to everyone quieting around all of the problems and issues. Instead of speaking about it or doing something about it, everything was swept under the rug. So I feel like she actually escaped her family through her fame and through her superstardom. She was able to escape that, but what she didn't realize psychologically, spiritually, is that she would always have to return home to reconcile the wounds of the past. Like if she were to ever actually heal, if she were to ever actually free herself or come to terms with or make peace with, there was always going to be this requirement of resolution of her history, where she came from, her family origins. Like it wasn't going to be enough to sweep it under the rug and get famous and move to LA. She was always going to have to go back home one way or another. And I feel like that's the conservatorship also symbolizes and reflects her necessity in terms of having to come to terms with her family and that healing work. Now, as I say that though, I feel a threat for her own safety. And so whether that's real or perceived, I feel like she's more scared of her father than he is actually capable of harm. That's not to say that he hasn't caused great harm, because he clearly has, abuse, if not trauma, and so on and so forth, and all of the manipulation and potentially exploitation that's been done. Of course, that's all alleged from what we've learned in the public eye. But I feel like he ultimately thinks it's for her good, and you can check out the other reading where we talked more about that. But I feel like she's more scared of her dad because of the dynamic and the role and sort of the structure that he's created. So he built a family around him basically being the dictator, and everyone was meant to be quiet and shut up and follow his lead. And as a result of that, even though he, of course, like at times clearly has caused harm in some ways, it's almost like there's more fear around him and what he's capable of because of this persona he's built up and this big old like broad-shouldered vibe he brings to a room. It's like he might bark, but it feels like he's more bark than bite. Now, it doesn't mean he's not capable of harm, again, but I feel like his family puts him on this pedestal and believes him more capable of harm than he actually truly is because of his reputation precedes him, right? Doesn't mean he's not capable of harm, but I feel like he built a family on this foundation of him being the dictator, i.e. tyrant. And so people are quite scared of him when ultimately they do have their own power, but it does require expressing their truth and not sweeping things under the rug. And it requires, speaking up, expressing oneself, expressing one's truth, being authentic to one's own truth. And I feel like that's where Brittney felt like she could not honor that within this confinement. So again, speaking to the conservatorship, and she might be coming out of this, but it did serve some necessary needs, and that is protection. So protection from not just the influencers that we've heard about and the people in her world in the early 2000s or around 2010. This is protection from the fishbowl, protection from the media scrutiny, protection from the hype and the hate, protection from even her own messes, if that makes sense. It's almost like, when we're hurting, we can create a mess or chaos in our life, and it's like a wake of destruction is behind us. And some of us behave more unconsciously when we're hurting, and some of us behave more consciously, and there's no right or wrong with that. But it seems like she was causing some messes in her life on a lot of levels in a lot of ways that were going to be very difficult to clean up. And so by being in this conservatorship, it's almost like it served its purpose, but it has expired. Like it served its purpose for her on a personal level, psychological level, and even it feels like a spiritual level. Not that this was necessary for her, but it was a means to what was necessary for her at the time. It didn't have to be manifested or turn into form as a conservatorship, especially manned by her father. But ultimately it served what it needed to in terms of bringing her solitude and protection, and it helped her to live an ordinary life, because ironically, Brittney loved the self-expression. She loved being who she is. She loved being able to dance and to sing and to really be this big, full, powerful persona and this presence, this stage presence, but also this world presence. But what she yearned for most was a happy, healthy home and family. The one thing she did not have as a child, allegedly, for entertainment purposes only. It's almost like she sought that because it was the one thing she didn't have. Now, as a viewer, we can look at our own lives, and I talk a lot about this, like on Wise Women, Oracle and Tarot, as well as any of the work that I do, that you'll notice that the one thing you want most, that we all want the most, the greatest, either conscious or even sometimes subconscious desire, is tied to the one thing we didn't get in childhood. So we'll find that we seek a whole life in this quest to secure ourselves or to secure something, or fulfill ourselves in a way that we were not met in childhood. So for Brittney, yes, she was this big soul with big dreams, big ambitions, and a big soul contract. And at the same time, what she wanted most was a happy, healthy home, a simple life, an ordinary life, a peaceful life, something really simple, close to earth, simple pleasure. She is not someone who needs a lot. Now, briefly, because I was sharing about it, and I feel like it's coming through, so the thought wasn't complete in terms of having to clean up her messes. So on all levels, it feels like there was, and I feel like this is the stuff you guys want to know, but it feels like there was messes financially, just, hemorrhaging money and just handing out money, not even knowing where the money was going. Just like, and it wasn't a complete disregard. It was obliviousness. It was her being naive. It was innocence, just not knowing where her money was going, not knowing how much money she had, where it was at, where it was being placed, who was handling it. It was almost like too big of a machine for this almost like small town woman, small town mind. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I come from a small town, but it's like, I'm like that too. I'm like too down to earth. I'm like, I don't even know how to handle all this. Like, even with my business, sometimes I'm like, I don't even know, so I feel like she was kind of like that, as well as, again, making messes. She was like burning bridges, and she started to get to a point where she didn't really know who she could trust and who she couldn't. So she was sort of like burning bridges over here, but then allowing people over here in her life that might not have been good for her, but cutting off the people who were good for her. Sometimes that comes across as keeping the yes people around, the enablers around, but then cutting off all the people who said no to her, who were actually trying to serve her best interest. And in some ways that was her father. Again, I think he takes it too far, and he uses his power far too much, and he interferes with someone else's sovereignty and their own will. And yet this all came about because, again, she was unable to clean up her messes or even acknowledge what messes she was making. So there was a lot of harm to herself being done financially, allegedly for entertainment purposes only. And her social media network, she no longer knew where to turn. It just feels chaotic. It feels chaotic. She has that documentary. Chaotic. It feels noisy. It feels loud. It feels intense. It feels overwhelming. It's almost like if you are living in a concert 24/7, like let's just say you are in the mosh pit, you're in the mosh pit 24/7 and you never get out. Can you imagine? Hey, can you hear me? Like, you can't hear anything. No one can hear you. It's chaos everywhere. The lights are out. You only have flashes of clarity, flashes of light. This person's around you and this person's around you, but it's hard to see. So it's hard to tell who you can trust, who you can't. Oh, is this person good for me? Is this not? It just became too much and too loud and too big and more or less unmanageable. And it felt like she didn't know, again, who to trust, who she couldn't, cut and burn bridges here and there, severed ties, but then perhaps lost people that did have her highest interest in mind. And because she was unclear and in a dark time, she wasn't able to see that they actually had her higher interests in mind and they were actually helping her as opposed to trying to hurt her. Now, I feel like there's a part of her that still can't see some of this yet because she's so hurt by the initial rejection, by the imprisonment or confinement. She's so hurt by it. She's not in the place yet to be able to see that, maybe not now, but in the beginning of her journey, there was a lot of people who were actually just trying to help her, and she was sort of smacking their hands. But ultimately, they were, she was biting the hands that feed her, and she didn't know it. But again, she was like this feral animal who couldn't see straight, and again was having struggle to clean up her messes. I do feel some people in her circle were there genuinely trying to clean up her messes, trying to help her. But again, it was so loud, so noisy, so many variables. It's almost like there had to be more order. There had to be more structure. There had to be more, discipline or something so that everyone knew this money is going here and this job is here, and that, so that way she's not missing an event or not showing up on time to this again. So there was even like kind of damage control in that way, making messes of like not showing up to things on time or not even knowing she had a commitment, sleeping in, staying out all night, not even knowing that she had something the next day. People scared to tell her, oh, you have to get up this morning, not you have the interview with blah blah blah. But at that point she was like, F it, I'm done, I don't even give a shit. She was over it. And so I feel this energy of like, you know, again, she's a superstar, but she got to this point where she was like, F it, I don't even care. And so might have been some unprofessional behavior. And I think we saw some of that in magazines. And I never believed it back in the day. I thought it was BS, to be completely honest, because I was such a hardcore fan. But today, and as I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, I can see that now. But I also see her, I'm willing to see her in her full self or full light of like, I can kind of get it. Like after a while, you're just like, I don't care. I don't need to show up to that thing. I don't really care about the consequences. But the problem is she was destroying her reputation and her professionalism. And like, there's something too, which is why they have PR people, ensuring your own reputation to preserve your star, right? To preserve your stardom, your path. And so a lot of things were being destroyed and crumbling. And I mean, the energy, that kind of energy, chaos, complete effing chaos. The thing that's going to turn it around is order, structure, and discipline. So in her life, really the only person that would have represented that and been able to come in at the time that she needed it most would have been, unfortunately, the dictator / tyrant of her life, who had always been there, her father. So while he had the qualities and traits necessary to bring order to this, it ultimately led to a lot of things that clipped Britney's wings. So, you know, we're seeing darkness and a loss of life and I don't mean loss of life like death. I mean loss of life like vitality, zest, enthusiasm, energy. Again, a wilted flower, you know, a butterfly's wings who have been clipped due to immense isolation and feeling like you can't do anything, you can't do anything right, you're not trusted, you can't get out, there's no way out, there will never be a way out, a lot of powerlessness and hopelessness, and just a total loss. And that's really what the conservatorship became for her. I think we're clear on what that is, so I don't think I need to dive too much into those energies, but more or less her experience of something that did bring some of the things that she needed: solitude, peace, protection, order. It turned out to be something that was long since expired and was becoming more of a life draining thing than a life affirming thing. So let's see here. Yeah, she really wants to just be herself, to be free, to dance even, maybe even to perform. I, again, still feel that energy primarily of her wanting to just live at home, be simple, live a simple life, live an ordinary life. But at the same time, she's having to make a deal with the devil, with herself, and mute that part of herself, that superstar part of herself, the part that loves the attention and loves performing and loves entertaining. She's having to mute that part of herself in order to more or less exact her revenge. It's like two can play at this game, you know? So she has this conservatorship, this confinement, and she no longer likes it. Well, I don't think she ever did. And so her fighting it is realizing she had to make a deal with the devil and decide, if I don't hit him where it hurts, which is his pockets, that's what she thinks and believes, and it very well might be true. He thinks he's doing something for the highest good, though. You can check out the other reading. If I don't make a deal with the devil and do this, I could be imprisoned forever. But ultimately, she knows this is in service to her freedom, so she's willing to do it. Meaning, not perform, not entertain, not express this part of herself. And she's finding ways to do that, obviously, through Instagram and perhaps through other means. But primarily, she's had to shut this part of herself off, made this deal with the devil, so that she could ultimately free herself. Let's see. Yeah, so it feels like, I mean, we have sisterhood, we have the world, and I feel like that's the world coming behind her for the Free Britney movement. Everyone's standing behind her to say, yes, free this woman, liberate this woman. This is abuse. This is unacceptable. This is, or should be, illegal. And so we've kind of gone through this timeline of events of what this conservatorship, what it has symbolized and how it served her, but also how it's been received and how it was done. It's like there was a lot of destruction happening in her life at a time where she was very vulnerable and she really couldn't see clearly. And so at that big rave with that mosh pit, someone had to come in there, turn the lights off and say, all right, everybody, cut off, time to go home. That was her dad. All right, so let's dive into her and KFed's relationship. So again, 2008, we're talking Britney and Kevin. Why am I talking about this? When I say Britney behind the scenes, why am I talking about Britney and Kevin? Well, I think I want to talk about Britney and Kevin because I feel like was a major choice point or breaking point for her, where it's like there was one path and then she started to derail and maybe even go off the rails. And I think he had a lot to do with it. And I think that the loss of that relationship had a lot to do with what led to this sort of wake of destruction and the whole experience that then led to the conservatorship. But again, at some level, this was a manifestation of her desire for an ordinary life. And as a famous person in a fishbowl with a lot of media scrutiny, really the only way to do that is to imprison yourself and stay in your house and not leave. And that's devastating and tragic. And I don't feel like it should be that way as a human, right? And yet it was almost going to be, that was the only way to fix this. And so it's like served its purpose, but ultimately it wilted her flower. And that's where that problem is. And it was managed by the wrong person, her father, who was already a tyrant in her childhood. But again, this is also helping her at a spiritual level come back home to her family of origin, and help heal those wounds within her that have to do with her inner child and her childhood. Whether or not she reconciled her relationship with her father, because that's not at all what I'm implying, and I don't want any hate about that. My human has a totally different set of opinions than what comes through in readings sometimes, if not often. So I just share what's here. And, we're not saying that her father is a good guy. We're just saying that we all have healing to do when it comes to our childhoods and our family of origins, and so does she. So we're going to talk about Kevin and what happened here. What went wrong in their marriage? What was the dissolution of their marriage? So it looks like they at first were sort of, living high as a kite, really enjoying that passionate love affair. Everything that it's all consuming in like a white hot romance. It's blinding. It's all consuming. You're on top of the world. It's fiery. And I feel like, so that was maybe, that was the beginning of their relationship, but it was founded on passion and lust and fire and fun. Okay. So it's important to remember that was the foundation of her and Kevin Federline's relationship. Because what we immediately get into, though, is ironically, again, it's Brittney having to reconcile these two parts of herself, because you have the fire, you have all in your face, totally expressive. And then you have this, that's kind of like fire. Then you have this like watery energy. I don't know what her zodiac profile is. She's a Sagittarius. No wonder. I bet her moon is water. I bet her moon is like, if someone tell me, I will look it up too and I'll put it in the comments, but someone tell me if you were an astrologist, you follow this kind of thing, if you know her profile, I would bet that her moon is either water, it could be earth, but I'm feeling water. And I'm, Cancer, Pisces. It could be Scorpio, because she had that year and has a lot of inner destruction and stuff at different times. And that's not a bad thing, right? We all like have these impulses, and some people more than others. Doesn't matter. Let me know. I feel like she would have a water moon. But I don't know for sure, because so she's reconciling these two forces, because she has this force within her that's more introverted, a pull that brings her closer to, like a magnetic pull that brings her closer to home, one's soul connection, simple pleasures, down south kind of ordinary life. And then she has this fiery energy for big firework, firecrackers, more. So she meets Kevin at the level of fire, of Sagittarius. But then quickly this relationship transitions to more water. And what I mean by that is, she's ready to build a home, a family, children. And like, it's almost like the transition into that was, I don't want to say too quick, because that's not what the energy feels like. It doesn't feel like it's a judgment. It just feels like it was so quick that I don't feel like either of them were ready to they didn't know how to properly engage and relate to each other and communicate in this relationship that was no longer based in fire and was instead based in water. Meaning it was no longer based in lust, passion, intercourse, and romance, and was more about family, home, support, presence. Those are can be conflicting energies, and if we haven't reconciled that within ourselves, it's gonna be really hard to reconcile that with someone else outside of us. And so quickly the relationship transitions into more watery energy, home and family. Brittney just wants to, it's kind of her heaven, her shtick, like what she's always wanted. And yet it looks like more or less Kevin just was not present. And this is what I suspected as my own ego self, Errity, but I wasn't sure. But we have someone who's at home, someone who's enjoying sort of the bliss of being home and having a child, and then the other person just being absent, being gone, not prioritizing, not being home, someone having to do it all themselves. It's almost like that bliss of having a family and having a home was immediately turned upside down because she realized, and of course this is all alleged, she realized that, oh wait, he's not even here. Like, I didn't want my dream to be me alone as a mom. I wanted to be with someone. And I think that's another lifelong yearning she has had, is for someone to feel close to her, or for her to feel close to someone. Because I feel like over the years, she's more been like a vessel for expression and like an icon. But these kinds of things, these symbols in our culture, can be objectified to the point where, with all the projections and stuff, they can lose contact with who they actually are. When you're always playing a role or wearing a hat, you lose touch with who you actually are. And so I feel like she really wanted to be able to connect with someone at a deeper level, from like Britney to somebody else, not like the superstar icon Britney, but just Britney from Louisiana Britney. She really wanted that connection, and it's been hard for her to find that. But ultimately she found someone, I feel like, who got caught up in that fiery lifestyle of partying and traveling. And I feel like Britney was maybe sending him, and this is all alleged, I don't know, this is kind of vibes I'm getting, like sending him texts and being like, I'm gonna go out and make out with a dude. Like, if you're going out every night, whatever, I guess I'm gonna go too. Leaves the babies with the nanny and goes out for a night in the town, and maybe sends him, might even send him pictures of her making out with dudes, or like at least threatening that, like that kind of thing. And it just feels like a lot of, like, not petty behavior, because I can understand it and I don't want to judge it, but I'm trying to come up with the energy of, like, when you are sort of engaging in some of those kinds of behaviors like a young child, in order to get the attention of somebody else, but it feels justified because you're like, you're not here and I'm going to make you want to come home and be here, kind of thing. So feel the kind of energy of like this competition of, she had this idea of how her life would go and how her family and home would run. She found that was not going to be the case, that Kevin was out doing his thing, still going with that partier lifestyle. It's like someone who has no money and then you hand them $1 million, they usually hemorrhage that very quickly because they've never experienced what it's like to have that kind of freedom. But then it leads to more or less destruction, and the money is all gone very quickly. A lot of the lotto winners, that's how it goes statistically. So I feel like he was given this big taste of freedom, but then right off the bat, they had babies, and it was like, wait, freedom but stability, and he chose freedom. She wanted stability, but he chose freedom, and they weren't able to reconcile that. And again, part of this issue is where they started their relationship on the freedom, and that's where their energies were at that time in their lives. But then with that child, it's almost like there was this new expectation, an immense one, that was even projected at Kevin, I feel like, and I think he wanted it too at a deeper level, but I don't know if he was ready. So he's out and about, he's partying, and she's like, okay, two can play at this game, kind of thing. Yeah, she was, I feel like she felt unsupported at home. She felt like alone, that she was doing it all alone, like what she thought was going to be like heavenly bliss in this healthy, happy home with her family and kids running around and whatnot. It became a burden. She was tired. She was doing it alone. She felt alone. She was alone. And she's like, well, wait a second. Like, this wasn't what it was supposed to be. I was alone when I was a star and I was a free bird and doing it my way. I might as well do that. But now I can't because I have kids, and homeboy's out doing what he wants. So energy. What else is here? I feel like Kevin was really concerned about making his own star. Like, Britney had her star, like in terms of stardom, and he was really working on trying to become someone, make a name for himself. He's like, I have this platform, I have this springboard, I really want to use this. I want to, I feel like he was more concerned about his own path and his own dream, and like using this as a springboard to aspire to something himself, as opposed to really supporting Britney at home with the kids, or supporting that dream that she had. Because here's the thing, they were incompatible. I'm getting a lot of information, so I'm really trying to see all this through, okay? Because I feel subconsciously Kevin felt insecure. This is a deep thing, but I feel like at some level, allegedly, he felt insecure with Britney's stardom and all the success that she had had. And so he felt, instead of being some low-level, low-life kind of dancer, he really felt like he had to bring something to the table for his family, for Britney. And he wanted to bring some equality and sort of actualize his own inner masculine, so to speak, and be able to meet her at her level. And so I think that was part of it. That's not all of it, okay? Because there's a lot of other energy in there, but I do feel that thread. Because I also feel like a lot of partying and a lot of living large and a lot of hedonism and going out there and doing as he pleases and justifying it and being like, F you, B, I do what I want. You stay at home and take care of my kids, B. Like, I feel like that kind of energy around him. I'm not saying he was careless or always reckless, but I am saying he was checked out, more so focused on himself and making his own star. And some of it was because he wanted to actualize himself, but a lot of it was just being a young dude who wants to party and has found a lot of money in his hands and is now taking full advantage of the life that's been handed to him. Meanwhile, here's the thing. Brittany's already been there, done that. So she doesn't care for that anymore. She's like, well, wait. No. I've already done that. I've been doing that for 10 years, I'm kind of over the partying, I'm kind of over traveling the world, all the things, big, here, there, the mosh pit. She's like, she's been doing that for 10 years. She's ready for the quiet, the solitude, the peace, the home, the family. And he's like, well, I was just born into this. Like, now I want to do this. And so I feel like one of the reasons they were able to come together, the magnetic draw that they had for each other, was she had actualized this freedom, this great success, this monetary success, and of course they had fiery romance and all that stuff that brings people together pretty easily, chemistry and sometimes toxicity and trauma bonding and whatnot. But anyway, and I don't even believe in a lot of that. Again, if you want to get to know more about me and how I see things, you can check out Wise Women Oracle and Tarot or Wise Women Television. But anyway, she had already actualized a lot of that stuff for herself, but she wanted home and family, something simple, closer to earth, something down to earth. And so what does she meet? Down to earth dude. Who doesn't have a lot to show for himself, but is down to earth and kind of street smart, knows how to, do what he's got to do to make a living, living a pretty ordinary life, pretty ordinary guy. And so what do? They attract each other because she has all this stuff and like freedom and money, all the things that he hasn't actualized for himself. And he has down to earth, home, family, street smarts, and all that stuff that she doesn't have. And so they're like magnets. Right? But what happens in that situation is if they're not able to see that, reconcile that, and do whatever they need to do for their own healing and growth, it's going to cause a lot of conflict. And it did for them, right? It became incompatible because he was there for the freedom and the money and all the things because he hadn't yet experienced that. And she was there for home and family and simplicity. Those are incompatible. And it looks like they weren't even aware of it to be able to make some common ground together, because I don't want to say all those relationships are impossible. I think they are possible. And yet, it can be hard if you're not aware of what's going on. So yeah, what happens, I feel like Brittany becomes a warrior kind of thing. I feel like she kind of Queen of Swords energy where she's like, like, you're not going to be out here. I don't think she would ever be like, oh, he was using me. But I feel like, again, she maybe made some threats and or made some ultimatums and or did her own share of toying around or messing around or whatever. I don't know if that's cheating. I don't feel the energy of that necessarily, but I do feel like teasing of that and flirting with that, like kind of messing with that energy in order to get a rise out of somebody. But I also feel like it was like there were maybe ultimatums, like you won't see your kids anymore. You don't get to have me in your life if you're going to behave like this. Like, you need to come home and you need to make me a priority. I feel some of that energy. And I feel like, again, didn't take her seriously, was very self-focused, focused on himself. And I feel like he might have more of an orientation around traditional gender roles, because I feel this energy of I go out, I do what I want, you stay at home and you take care of the kids. Like, that's your job. I'm going to go out and be a man and do what I want and do as I please. And you're going to be at home with the kids. I kind of feel that energy. Let's see here. Give me a moment. So yeah, the energy here is her also being like setting these ultimatums, and I feel like she was even pushed a couple of times by her team to make a move, to do a thing, to say a thing like, oh, he's going to give you a bad rap and this looks really bad for your name, for your image, you have to do what's best for yourself, like that kind of energy, I feel like. And so maybe she lost like full touch with what she wanted. And again, her whole life has been massively influenced and controlled. So that energy is already here, and especially in the last reading. But I feel like at a personal level, she thought he was going to fight for the marriage. She was hoping he would fight for it. She was hoping he would fight for her, knight in shining armor, that he would show up, kind of richer gear and Pretty Woman, where he shows up to her castle and works his way back to her, fights his way back to her. But you know what? He didn't fight at all. He just let her go. And I think that was her biggest devastation. It wasn't so much that the marriage was dissolving and that he was absent and more or less abandoned her and that her dreams were shattered. Like the idea that she had for them and the idea that she had for herself, realizing that wasn't going to work out, coming to terms with that massive, massive, massive loss. But it was also that he never fought for her and that he just let her go. And so she felt almost like trash. Like, oh, so you can just dispose of me like that? Like, I mean, you're everything to me. I've given you everything. I've given you this whole life, the world, the riches. I've given you the King of Pentacles. I've given you the sun. If you're familiar with the tarot, I've given you all of this. Look at this energy I've given you. I've given you everything. I've given you everything. My body, these children, my soul. I've given you wealth, fame, everything you could ever want. and you walked away from me and you didn't say a word and you just guarded me. Like he didn't. I think anytime she gave an ultimatum or tried to end the relationship, she was actually waiting for him and hoping that he would fight for her, and he didn't. And I feel like that was the big loss. Nothing. Like, I'm even taking a look at this card. Nothing. He did nothing. No response, no fighting for her. Just never mind, forget it. I feel like in some ways he thought he would just be able to move on, and now that he was famous, he would just figure it out for himself and he wouldn't really need her. And we're going to get into Kevin and her energy here in just a moment. We're going to go deep in this reading, so hopefully some of you guys care about this. Now, Brittany's energy is like, looking over everything that she has, but just feeling like it wasn't fulfilling for her. It's like, okay, I have the dream home, I have the dream career, I have this partner, and I have these children, but I'm alone. I'm unsupported. I think she felt like fat and insecure, like telling herself, I'm fat, I'm insecure, all I do is cry. And I think she could have been dealing with some postpartum depression. I don't know about after the first kid, but I know, as Errity, this isn't from the reading, definitely after the second kid, but I feel like I just see her kind of crying, sad, alone, upset, and realizing she has to make a choice, like, what do I do? But ultimately, this is what led to her destruction, because we have the death card, where I feel like, this relationship ultimately ended. He wasn't contributing. She was upholding this entire relationship through all of her own personal energy, but as well as her like pentacles, all the things that she had built, this home, this family, this life, this dream, like she was upholding it all. And he was just sort of like a player who was like hanging out and in it. But he really wasn't contributing or participating in any active or functional way. And she realized that this was all her projection the whole time. Like, this was my dream, and he happened to come in here and play like my knight in shining armor, but he actually wasn't. He didn't build this house. He didn't contribute to this house, to this dream, to my life, even to these kids. It's like he was there for some good, what, but that's about it. And she realized that. The relationship came to an end. So we're already at 40 minutes. We haven't even gotten all the way through. So let's see what we can get through here. Because I think a lot of it's already been said, but I did pull cards on both Brittany and Kevin to get to know a little bit more of their psychology behind the disillusion of their relationship. So we have him where I feel like, he has these two sides to himself. He has the side where he's like, wants to be a superstar and this player and go out there and get girls and all this stuff. Now, I don't feel like actual cheating he might have, but I think he entertained it. He either entertained the idea or he skirted around it and maybe even dipped his toe in the water, whether or not he went all the way or did too many times. But I feel like that temptation was there and very clear for him. Let me see what else is here. So ultimately, it feels like instead of going through each card individually, I'm going to gather the themes of the whole row just so we can move through it. So it feels like in general, he was like sort of fighting his inner battles or his demons about it, meaning like he had those two forces, one impulse to be that good father that he knew he could be and be that like role model. Like I feel like that was a desire for him, but I don't think he was ready for it yet, especially when he'd just gotten a taste of freedom and wealth and riches and fame. And I feel like, again, he thought he could offer that to her and saw that as a possibility and potential for himself too within that relationship, but ultimately had this subconscious force that was going to blow everything out of the water, where he's like going to play, he's out free, like he's going to live his life, he has abundance. I mean, we have the play card, we have abundance. I feel like they were leading just very different lives with incredibly different values, and the compatibility over time simply waned. And then any efforts to communicate, I feel the energy of her writing him and saying, come back home, or I love you, or I miss you, or why are you doing this, and why are you always gone, or whatever. I don't think she did a lot, but she did enough. And maybe only when she was feeling extremely vulnerable, because I also feel a part of her that like wanted to honor his freedom and independence and his dreams, and she didn't know whether she didn't want to like stomp out his dreams either. Like she did genuinely care. But then like when she would text or call him or be like, the kids need you or whatever, he would turn off the phone. He wouldn't answer it. He'd been all night. He'd come home the next morning at 6 a.m. or 2 days later, and he hadn't even answered her calls. He hadn't even responded to her text messages. So I feel that kind of energy. How it takes form, who knows, but that's the energy that I feel. Is there anything else here? I just feel like she realized that I mean, her dreams were shattered. It wasn't at all what she expected or what she wanted. Oh, 1 second. All right. So my battery was going out on my laptop. All right, so let's talk about Brittney. Yeah, her dreams were shattered. She was absolutely devastated. She was the one trying to make this work. And this is all alleged, I don't know for sure. This is the energy here. It feels like he is MIA. He's checked out. He's living large. He's living the dream. And more or less has checked out. I really want to know why he checked out. Was it just the taste of fame and freedom? Or maybe it was because Brittney was so needy and clingy and he couldn't handle that and he didn't realize. I also feel like he may not have been the most supportive partner in terms of like pregnancy and after pregnancy, where women tend to be a little bit more vulnerable and tender and in need. Why wasn't he more supportive of her? Or like, why did he check out? Because he loved her so stinking much. Because they did have incredible love, profound romance. Why did he check out? The only energy I can gather there is just like that typical dude kind of vibe where it's like F-a-B, like just like forget it, like they don't own me, and I'm a man, I can do what I want. But I wonder what that's underlying. There has to be something there that's causing that, but I'm not getting it. I don't want to put more cards on it because I feel like we've done quite a lot here. If you do want to know, comment below and I can always pull a card on it later and add to the comments. We're going to keep going with Brittney. I just really want to know, why is she the one holding all this together? Why is she trying to keep this going? It's like this dream is crumbling. She's desperate. She's trying to hold on. She's holding on for dear life. She wants to make it work. She sees that it's crumbling fast. But she's the one who's fighting for it. He's chill, laid back, ain't doing a damn thing. You know what I mean? I feel like she realizes she has to move on, but that's really hard for her. And so I feel like she does, to a degree, follow her own inner voice. And that's where that Queen of Swords came out earlier, where she starts realizing she has to dig her heels in the ground. She might have gone through that whole thing of like, people aren't going to use me, like, But I feel like she felt this deeper awareness where she had to come to terms with like, okay, this isn't going to work. Like, this isn't going to go anywhere. And I feel like there's like a longing or even a sorrow in that, of coming to terms with this wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to go anywhere. Yeah, I mean, she really longed for him, but I feel like what happened as a result of their energies being in totally two different places and this incompatibility that resulted after her jumping into water instead of they're both staying in fire for a little while is, and honestly, take a look at what happened with him and Shar. And this is Errity speaking. It's always me, but I'm just saying I sometimes like to add things. Him and Shar were together, and what happens, like, I'm sure they had a fiery, awesome romance, especially this dude's name was Meat Pole, so I'm sure he got his, and he found his ladies and did whatever he needed to do, and then he makes babies with Shar, and as soon as it becomes real, as soon as it becomes stable, as soon as he has to become a father, what does he do? He cheats and runs off with Britney Spears into more fire. So I think this guy was used to the thrills and the big life and freedom and all that stuff, and again, just perhaps was not quite ready to settle down. But I feel like they fought a lot. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of arguing, a lot of disagreements, a lot of all that fiery, passionate energy instead of kind of being conducive to romance, became conducive to arguing, fighting, conflict. There might have been even some physical conflicts at different times, throwing a lamp or whatever. I just feel like heightened energy, loud voices, like real kind of down home dysfunctional conflict where it's like ain't no holds barred. I kind of feel that energy with them where they're like not seeing each other clearly. And I feel like if they had come together and really connected within themselves with who they were when they first met and were able to see each other with more innocence, with more grace, and really meet each other at that level, I think things could have worked out. But they just weren't there yet. I don't think that they were there yet, maturely, in terms of maturity, consciousness, awareness, whatever. Let me see what else is coming up here. I feel like Brittney realized, at some level, this is more like an intellectual vibe, because I don't know if she had a felt sense of it at the time, but she might have been telling herself, like, this isn't going to work. Clearly, this is the wrong person or the wrong guy or whatever. this isn't my bigger dream and I don't want to settle. I feel like ultimately she wants the dream. She wants the family, she wants the partnership, she wants the support, and she wants, that ordinary life at home, kind of drinking tea out on the porch kind of vibe. And she realized she wasn't going to get that from Kevin because he was still a guy who wanted to be dancing on towers in Tokyo and Paris and LA and New York. Like, he was looking for the big life, and she'd already been there, done that, and she was looking for the simple life. And she realized, this wasn't going to work with him. Okay, so those are their energies. Let's talk about her. This is the behind the scenes of her 2008 meltdown. So I feel like we've already kind of set the stage. We're aware of some of the deeper influences. We're aware of sort of the noise and stuff that's been going on in her life, the mosh pit kind of vibe. That came out a little bit after her and Kevin Federline, but then we dived into their relationship, Brittany and KFed, like what happened, the timeline of events, where he was, where she was at, their incompatibility. She realizes that she has to move on. Like, even take a look at this 6 of Swords here. She realizes she's not going to get or find what she wants in this relationship. And I feel like what she's doing here at this point is she's talking herself through it. She's like patting herself on the back. You can do this. We got to do this. At that level, like mentally, she knew what she had to do. I feel like her team was probably in support of that and knew this had to be done as well, because things started popping up in the press and it just wasn't looking good. And I feel like, PR wise, she wanted to maintain that, or at least they wanted to maintain that. I don't think she ever really gave an F. She did and she didn't. Again, she has those two sides to herself, that fiery Sagittarius, I don't give it an F, suck a D side. And then she has the other side where it's like deeply tender, vulnerable, scared animal in a cage, who is concerned with what other people think. But anyway, she's realizing she has to move on. I think she's, though, telling herself that. And I feel like she hasn't actually dealt with it emotionally. She hasn't dealt with it actually. So it's like she knows what she has to do. She starts taking necessary steps. I think we started seeing some of that in the public eye, where she goes on David Letterman and she files for divorce. She's doing the things that she knows she needs to do, but she's not there yet emotionally. Her heart is not on board. Her heart is still in agreement to this dream. Her heart is still yearning for this dream. Her heart still wants this. Her heart still wants Kevin Federline, what she felt like to be the love of her life. I feel like she felt that with Justin. Maybe we'll do a Brittany behind the scenes with Justin at some point. I think that could, let me know if you want that. Comment below if you want to do a Brittany and Justin behind the scenes video. I feel like that was her big first heartbreak, in terms of, we all have our first high school heartbreak that kind of hits the hardest, fractures our self-esteem, our self-concept. Very, very difficult to get over. It's our first love, our first heartbreak, and it's sort of like our entry into non-innocence, into maturity, into adulthood, into ultimately wisdom. But with Kevin, I feel like, this was the one that broke her, because this is who she thought was going to be the love of her life. This was her forever, ever, This was, she devoted herself to him. She loved him. And I think we all know that level of love where you feel it in your soul. She thought this was it, and she would have given her all. I feel like she's a devotee in love. She wants to give her all. She will give him her body. She will give him her heart, her soul, her wealth, her riches. She will give them everything. But the thing that she has missed so far, this is just my opinion, and even the energy, of Kevin and so on and so forth. We touched on her current boyfriend, Sam Asghari's energy in the last reading, so do check that out. But she chooses people who she devotes herself to, sort of peons or pawns instead of kings. I feel like they're ready for, again, a lot of what she can offer, but not always available to love her or give her what she needs. And I don't think she realized that, but she loves with great devotion. So she realizes mentally this is what she does, what she needs to do. She's ready to rebirth, but she's fighting herself on this. There's a lot of conflict because she's telling herself what she needs to do. And I feel like she might also be being told that by her team, or just the people around her. Like, he's not good for you, girl. Like, he's cheating on you. Like, this is not good for you. Or her PR team is like, I'm trying to give words to the energy that's here of people kind of pushing this along, nudging this along. This does not look good. It does not look good in the tabloids. You have 2 boys that you need to take care of. This is important. He's out gallivanting around town and going to Vegas and doing all this stuff. He's going to throw away all your money. He's going to waste all of your money. And, this is about you and about your boys and what you need to do to take care of them. So that kind of energy, I feel like, to where she's like, okay, you're right. Yeah, I know what I need to do. But then I don't think emotionally yet, heart-wise, she was on board, because I feel like in so many ways, she wanted him so very deeply and still was madly in love with him, and still hadn't come to terms with the fact that he had abandoned her, if not betrayed her, and that, she hadn't come to terms with even the rejection. that he, again, didn't fight for her, didn't fight for the relationship, never even showed up really for this relationship, for this home, for this family, for the family of their 2 boys before he got primary custody. So let's see what's going on here. So I think for a time she goes out and parties, she's solo, she's having the time of her life. She's like, all right, do it up, you know, but this is her trying to integrate. This is her trying to make sense of everything, to make peace with everything, to come to terms with it. It was her in avoidance and denial of the pain. So she's going out there, she's partying, she's living it up. But part of her just wanted to do that because she wanted him to see her plastered all over the tabloids. She saw herself, I think she wanted herself to be plastered all over the tabloids so that he would see it. And he would think like, oh shit, like, look what I missed out on. You know, I lost my girl. I lost the love of my life. I lost my dream. She wanted to sort of compete with him and be like, again, two can win at this game, but also like, you know, he's going out and I'm seeing him in all these tabloids. I want him to have that same effect. But it was competition more than it was jealousy. It's like, I'm going to show him and maybe he'll come back. Maybe he'll come back. You know, she's like, he sees me all over these tabloids and out and about, living my own life, doing my own thing. He's going to want me back. But Kevin's not like that. He's not one who's going to go chasing after a woman. You know, he did instead. He just partied it up more, probably slept with more women, did his own thing, and was like, oh, okay, she's going to go out there and do that. She's going to go out there and wear that and look like that with all these other men, all these people, and she's doing it without me. All right. You know, she's going to get hers. She's not going to know it, but she's going to get hers because I'm going to do what I want too. And I'm going to do it bigger, better, and better than her. So that's what I mean by competition. There was this unspoken competition of her, but she wanted to be saved by him. She wanted him to show up, to fight for her, but he was never going to do that. He was never, ever, ever going to chase her. Now, as we go deeper with this, I'm feeling like ultimately the deepest level, allegedly, you know, this is how I see it in terms of the energy, she was seeking that fatherly figure, that father love that she really never got. You know, that was more or less absent for her father. I feel like he was always operating in her best interest, doing what he needed to do, and kind of like very logical and rational about his children and kind of in the role of it, knowing his responsibilities. Didn't always show up for them, but kind of showed up in that role and that vibe and that energy. But ultimately, he really never showed emotional love, emotional nourishment, that kind of love that any kind of girl or little girl seeks in their own father. And I don't see at all a connection in terms of the kind of person Kevin is with the kind of person her father is. I think they're complete opposites, and I think there's a reason for that. She did not want to get with someone like her father, even though that's kind of the energy that sometimes a Sagittarius or someone like her might need in terms of a partnership, some complementary energies. But thankfully that water grounds her a little bit. I feel like she threw herself at this man and whatever, but ultimately he was emotionally unavailable for her. It was never going to be able to offer her what she needed or wanted. And instead of going after her to save her, he was going to be the kind of guy that turned away. So what does she become? She becomes a rebel. She starts fighting like everything. She's like, well, then fine. If nothing's going to work, if none of these relationships work, like, what am I doing all this for? Like, forget it. Never mind. So I feel like she starts saying F it to everything. F it to Kevin, F it to the machine, F it to the control, F it to her reputation, to her image, to the public. The haters are going to hate anyway. F them. The paparazzi are going to be all over me. F them. It's like she gets in this very rebellious attitude of, well, never mind then, you know, and what's the point? And like, you get to that point where everything feels futile, and it's almost like you throw your hands up and you say, well, then for whatever, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want without consideration of the consequences, because it doesn't matter anyway. And, you know, that kind of vibe that we can get into. And so I feel like she goes into rebellion, but against not just Kevin. It's almost like rebellion of life, rebellion against God, rebellion against the whole, I keep saying machine, but that's not the energy. It's like whatever this was that has sort of held her in place and guided her career and kept everything just so, and hush hush and do this and do that and sign these papers and not these. She was like, F that, forget that, I'm done. F that, forget that, I'm done. Just a lot of rebellious energy. Of course, she's shaving her head. She's not wanting to follow the rules, the norms, the customs. And I think this is where she got herself in trouble. Her Sagittarius rebel went a little bit too far in terms of what is deemed normal or customary or okay or acceptable, because I don't think she felt invincible or above the law at all, but I feel like she felt like, you know, I don't have to live by these people's rules. I don't have to live by the public's approval. of me. I'm kind of done with that. I don't have to live with my dad's approval of me. I'm kind of done with that. I don't have to live with my team's approval of me. I'm kind of done with that. Just firing people again. We saw that earlier, burning bridges, disconnecting, just never mind, forget it. I'm done. F all y'all kind of vibe. And I think this is where that vibe too comes in of like, well, then primarily she starts having enablers in her world too, who will just say, yes, spend that money, girl, like take care of you, do what you got to do. But again, then she's hemorrhaging money. And so it was a very sort of chaotic and destructive space to be in. A man who has nothing to lose is the most dangerous man on the planet. Brittany had nothing to lose. And she did, her kids, and she ended up losing her kids too. But I don't feel like she saw it that way at first. She was like, I'm rebelling. Like, I don't have to do this everyone else's way. My wings have been clipped for years now. This is in 2008, so this is before she even goes into the conservatorship. But she always felt she kind of had to live sort of inhibited in some way because her PR and her image, all this stuff. But she realized I played by all the rules and it didn't work anyway. So F the rules. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it Brittany's way. But she didn't realize in her Sagittarius fire and rebellion that there are some things that are necessary or required in terms of our culture and our society. And if you don't meet those standards, there are consequences, real world, even legal consequences that you will have to face. And so, of course, we know that's what comes down. But ultimately, this whole journey was about her healing and working through the letting go of Kevin, letting go of the loss of that relationship, letting go of the loss of that dream, the loss of what she felt like was her home and her family. I mean, she had deeply wanted this in every fiber of her being. And, you know, it didn't pan out, it didn't work out, and there's no words to capture it. There's a very, very deep, grave loss here, and a shattering of dreams and total disillusionment, disappointment, abandonment, neglect, betrayal, loss. And so instead of letting it take over and be succumbed by it at first, she was rebellious, and she had no idea that her rebellion would bring about this conservatorship. She had no idea that her rebellion was something that was going, and it could have been because of the enablers. It could have been because she'd always kind of done what she wanted to a degree within her bubble of fame. And I don't think she realized the real world implications and consequences of her actions at that time. So it wasn't like I'm not feeling that much energy of drug use. I feel like partying, alcohol, maybe some other extracurricular drugs here and there, but I don't feel like heavy medication. I don't feel addiction. I feel a partier. I feel like someone who doesn't give an F. I feel like someone who's rebelling and saying F you. I feel like the energy of someone who is going through any kind of breakup or divorce as an average American, you know, because that's what the culture I'm familiar with. You know, I didn't act like this, you know, when I've had breakups or divorces, but maybe I should have, and sometimes I wish I did. You know, I've tended to make more conscious or mature, wiser decisions for myself. But we all have that destructive force after loss in a lot of ways, and whether we act on it or not, perhaps, you know, there's a number of reasons why. In her case, she did, but she had no idea it was going to bring about this. She had no idea she was going to be deemed like mentally unfit or mentally unstable. You know, in her mind, she was dealing with grief and heartbreak and loss. And instead of being supported and loved and sort of helped to heal through this, basically she was put in a prison, put in rehab, and demanded that she get better or else, you know, or your kids are being taken away. And she's like, wait, I just lost my life and my home and my dream, romance and all these things. And now you're locking me up? Like, what? I'm just going through heartbreak. Can you let a girl grieve? You know, I feel like that was her energy. So now let's talk about Brittany's mental health. So, and like what led to the conservatorship in and of itself. Like, we've talked about a lot of the behaviors and some of that self-destruction, the rebellion. Let me go ahead and bring these cards closer so I'm not turned like this the whole time. So I'm not sure if this helps because I have them right next to me, so I do have to look over a little bit. But ultimately, you know, because I wanted to find out psychologically, you know, are we talking addiction? People have said dementia. We've heard of borderline and bipolar disorder and all these things. And I'm not one to follow DSM or like subscribe to psychological or mental health diagnoses. I do, there's some value in them. With that said, I'm not getting that energy from Brittany. What I'm getting is she didn't know how to say no, and she didn't even know when to say no. Again, she just really didn't have that street smart skill set of like where her money's going, how to manage it, all that stuff. And she was very trusting and naive and open and warm. You know, she had that Southern charm, Southern hospitality, where she was ready to be open, ready to be loved, ready to love, happy to serve some tea. But she didn't realize, I don't think, and who would, you know, again, she's very down to earth, that it's like when you get up to that level, because she still saw herself as little old Brittany. she didn't see herself as superstar icon. So she wasn't realizing that there can be leeches and predators and people who will take from you or sell a story or whatever. And so I feel like she oftentimes was very receptive and let people in that probably weren't going to serve her best, like her highest good. So in terms of her mental health or her psychology and what led to all this, there was a vulnerability there to becoming prey, to predators, to people who weren't going to serve Britney's best interests. So there was a genuine vulnerability there that was a cause for having to bring about this conservatorship. Now, do I agree with it? Do I think it's legal? Do I think special abuse and trauma within that is okay? No. Do I think all of that was necessary? No. But the energy is saying, these are the energies that sort of led to this. There needed to be a new start, a fresh start, something else, because she was getting off path. She, in terms of maybe her soul contract or whatever, she was derailing into areas that were really could have thrown her life off path and off course. It's almost like the conservatorship did have a purpose and a function, especially energetically. How it ended up being manifested with her father manning it is a totally different story, and it becoming extremely sour because then his ego got into it. And then it's like once an ego is invested in something, it can turn something that could be neutral or even promising or worthwhile or purposeful into something that's not okay. But in the beginning, this was going to support her to set the necessary boundaries and protection for herself, for her life, for her family, for her kids, for her home, and for her money. Okay, it feels like there were people getting really intimately involved in her life that did not need to be there. And we're going to derail her life into areas where this could have been an Anna Nicole Smith or a Whitney Houston or any of those other tragic stories that we've seen in Hollywood. So this was to refresh, recalibrate her life, put her back on true north, or put her back due north. Also, I don't know where that cut off, but we're just about finished up here. I don't know if I'm looking at the conservatorship from the outside looking in and like why the conservators put this in, but my intention was about her psychology and what would necessitate something like a conservatorship, more or less within her, what led to this. And so we talked a little bit about that, but it was also to ensure the right people were a part of her life, like true people, genuine people, people who had her best interests in mind, who had the greatest of intentions, who were there for her, Britney as her, not her money, not her lifestyle, not what she could offer, not a means to an end, not someone who wanted to exploit her, take from her, steal from her, because that's happened plenty often and plenty enough, and she doesn't need any more of that. The last thing she needs to be is more prey to other predators. I feel like that's what was intended with this conservatorship, or how it could have supported her well-being, because she did need a real friend. She did need a sincere companion, someone who actually was on her team, in her corner. But I know ultimately, unfortunately, what this led to was no one being around, in total solitude. Well, I don't think that was the intention spiritually for the conservatorship. Again, once an ego gets involved, like her father's, it can go any which way. But I think it could have been a better service and more purposeful and valuable to her had it been done well or right, and had it expired when she was ready and able, which it hasn't yet been expired, and she's ready and able to do all this on her own for the most part. And last but not least, I feel like there was a rebirth here. Let me see what else wants to come through. There's one final card. In terms of her mental health, I think her passion, again, her rebellion, were taking her to a place that could have, again, led to her demise, destruction or death in some way. Now, I don't know what that would have looked like. Clearly, that never happened. But I did pick up on some of this in the last reading, where a lot of this was valid. Like, her dad really genuinely wanted to help. Now, is he an a-hole? Yes. Does he have the greatest energy toward his daughter? No. Is he totally emotionally absent? Yes. Is he act like a tyrant and dictator? Yes. And yet, it feels like this would have derailed and could have, and she didn't know it, that it was a slippery slope. This rebellion, this defiance, this big FU was leading her into areas and places that she actually didn't want to go, but didn't realize she was going. Really dark corners. It's like going into the dive bar, in a town that you don't want to be entering. So it was like kind of that energy where it's like it was leading her that could have led to like an Anna Nicole Smith or a Whitney Houston or something else of that matter. We have, was it River Phoenix, and we have so many of them. And I hope I even got that right. I don't even know if that's correct. But anyway, so ultimately the conservatorship was to meet these sort of mental health needs where, she wasn't able to see correctly. She would say yes. She was very down to earth, but then too trusting. She was just innocence, total innocence. And then, ironically, she ended up being is the word predated, but she ended up being victimized or perpetrated against, even though this whole system was built with conservatorship to protect her, because she was victimized anyway. So what are the final outcomes here? I feel like ultimately, at this point anyway, Brittney has found her own truth and realized she's no longer listening to her team and these other voices. She's finding her own truth, her own authenticity. She's found greater perspective within herself and seen where sort of she went wrong. And I think there's still some wounding in there that she's trying to protect, that she's really scared to look at, because it almost feels all-consuming. Like if she looked at, where maybe she put herself, or maybe she would have to face that maybe she put her kids in danger at different times, not even knowing. Because of her sweet innocence, her purity, but that'd be really hard to face. I think there's some things in there that are still protected, but otherwise she's finding her own truth. She's no longer listening to anyone else. It feels still a little bit new, finding her footing with it, but she's getting there, and she's ready to control this ship. She's ready to man and captain this ship that is her life, take back control, take back the reins, take back her power. She also wants to enjoy her life. And we got this last time: luxury, lavishness, abundance. She wants to enjoy what she worked hard for, all right? She wants to be like out shopping if she wants to shop, getting her toes done, her nails did, lipo if she wants lipo. She's like, I'm going to live up my life. Cruise ship, vacation spots, whatever I want to do. Globe trotting, whatever. Like, she's like, I want to live up my life and do what I'm meant to do. And so I feel like that energy is here too, of her being able to enjoy the fruits of her labor. There is a desire for that. These are potential outcomes and like where we're at right now. Last but not least, I do feel like she ultimately is freed in some way. We do talk about this in the last reading, where the energy shifts, both Jamie, her father, and her, where they bring about like a mutually beneficial outcome ultimately that does serve Brittney and her greater freedom, where she starts to see the light at the end of the tunnel. She starts to see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And she's like a child giddy with delight at the taste of freedom, that she can have her life back, that she can have her riches back, her kids back, her dreams back. She feels like it's a new lease on life. So that is my reading behind the scenes on Brittney, timeline, breakdown, KFed, children, conservatorship, all the way up through present. If you like this reading, if you enjoyed it, do comment below. I'd love to hear your reflections, how you took some of this. If you have anything to share, do press the bell icon. That way you receive notifications. You can also subscribe to my other YouTube channels, Wise Women Oracle and Tarot and Wise Women Television. You can check out those links below. And you can also visit me at my website, erritygreen.com. Thank you.